Welcome to Net Zero, a conversation co-sponsored by the League of Women Voters of Cape Cod and the Cape Cod Climate Change Collaborative. I am Suzanne Brock, the president of the League of Women Voters of Cape Cod. The League's mission is to engage in voter service and citizen education, as well as to advocate for legislative action surrounding League-studied issues, one of which is environmental protection. Net zero is a vision for reducing carbon pollution on the Cape and Islands. This topic will be discussed along with updates on state environmental legislation. Mon Conkrin is currently the Vice President of the Cape Cod Climate Change Collaborative and an adjunct educator with the Center for Coastal Studies. He grew up on the Cape, went to Orleans Public Schools, and received his Bachelor's of Arts from Harvard in sociology. His PhD in developmental psychology is from the University of Michigan. Mon is a professor emeritus at Cornell University, where for 35 years he taught and conducted applied child developmental research in the College of Human Ecology. Since retirement, Mon has shifted his focus to ways of helping children and adults understand why the Earth's climate is changing and what they can do to manage those changes. He currently lives in South Orleans. Mon will engage in a discussion with Susan Starkey. And Susan is the co-chair of the Faith Communities Environmental Network, which is a member of the Cape Cod Climate Change Collaborative, where she serves on the board. Professionally, she is a leadership coach, specializing in how we develop and change as individuals and as organizational leaders. She's embraced eco-justice as her calling since moving to Yarmouthport with her husband 6 years ago. Susan is also a member of the League of Women Voters of the Cape Cod area and a member of the League's Environmental Committee. Susan?
Great. Welcome, everyone. And I think we can jump right in just a moment. Mon will share his screen shortly. We, like Suzanne said, we encourage you to put questions in the chat. I'll bring them in when I can, and/or we'll have a Q&A section where I can ask questions from the chat after about 30 minutes. So today you're going to learn who is the Climate Change Collaborative and what are their goals and intentions. You're going to learn about net zero so that we can all understand what that really means. We talk about that term, but what does it really mean? You'll see some important statistics and information about how we're doing with reducing greenhouse gas emissions from studies that the Cape Cod Commission has done. And then very helpfully, you'll hear quite a number of examples of things that are happening because of the collaboration of so many different groups on the Cape and Islands. So Mon has much to offer us here, as well as you do with the conversation that we'll be having via a written chat. So I'm so glad you're able to do this, Mon, and to bring in your mother's memory. Wasn't she the one of the originators of the League of Women Voters?
Yes, she was. And I remember well her enthusiasm when it all began. She was very, very excited. Let me share here then.
Great.
And see if I can make this work. There we go.
Oh, good.
Can you all?
Well, that's a perfect. Yeah, you could be a little louder, maybe.
I'm afraid my volume is
Oh.
up way.
Okay.
I can speak louder.
There you go. So, Mon, would you start with just telling us what is the Climate Change Collaborative and what's the intention behind it?
Certainly. The collaborative has been operating for about 5 years. We're a coalition of organizations and businesses and citizens, all of us committed to mitigating the climate crisis here on the Cape and Islands. And by mitigation, we're talking about actually stopping the warming that's going on, the warming of the climate. Others on the Cape are focused on adaptation, that is making the changes in our towns needed to protect us against, for instance, sea level rise. We are not focused on adaptation. We're focused on actually stopping the dangerous changes that are taking place. So the mission of the collaborative is to reach carbon neutrality, or what we call net zero. And I'll come back to that concept in a minute. We collaborate, it's as our title says. So communication, collaboration, activism among organizations and programs and individuals is what we're all about. And we work hard to create the conditions that foster innovative, feasible, cross-sector solutions to the climate crisis. So we believe that by working together and talking to one another and sharing ideas, we'll move forward more quickly and more effectively. I wanted to just share a list of some of the partners that we work with, some of the ones that are having the biggest impacts here on the Cape and Island. So you see the Cape Light Compact is where you go for energy audits. They also work on pricing electricity for all of us. The Cape and Vineyard Electric Co-op is an outreach arm of the compact. And they're the ones on the ground that have been, for instance, erecting all these solar arrays on our landfills. And then on down the list, Vineyard Wind, big offshore partner, the bank, Cape Cod 5, the transit authority that runs the buses up and down the Cape. Susan has already mentioned the Faith Communities Environmental Network, which I'll come back to. The 15 towns, the municipalities, private corporations like Cape Air, and Cape Air in particular has been extremely helpful. And then the land trusts in all the towns on the Capes. The umbrella organization is the compact.
What a great group of partners. What kind of goals have been set for the collaborative?
We have 4 goals, and actually we thought of them as very assertive when we created them a couple of years ago, but the rest of the world is catching up with us. So goal 1 is to reduce fossil fuel usage by 50% from 1990 levels, and to do that by 2030, which is just 10 years from now. A second goal is to achieve 100% use of renewable electricity by 2050. So there we've given ourselves 30 years. A third goal focuses on our forests and marshes. So there we want to better understand the natural carbon balance, how it's changing over time, and be able to recommend ways that residents on the Cape and Island can enhance and increase carbon storage by natural processes. And I'll be coming back to that as well. And then finally, of course, we have a major goal of educating residents, not only about the causes and impacts of climate change, but also about our net zero goals, as I just outlined them, and priority action steps for meeting those goals.
These still feel ambitious to me. How are we defining it?
They are ambitious, but we now have an administration at the federal level that's going to help us. I wanted to say a few words about net zero. And to do that, I'm introducing you to the greenhouse gas emissions inventory that the Cape Cod Commission has just completed. And that inventory looks at 6 emission sectors, which are broken down into 19 subsectors. and 60 subsector categories. And each of those categories has a specific calculation that requires discrete data. And so the five major categories are shown here. And this is Cape specific. So actually, it varies a little bit from the state of, or the Commonwealth of Massachusetts as a whole. But what you see is that transportation is more than half the emissions that are produced on the Cape. And within transportation, passenger cars are the primary culprit. I will say that buses contribute, and the ferries that run out to the islands are significant emissions producers. So keep transportation very much at the front of your minds as we go forward here. And then the number two, almost 40% of emissions come from the energy that we use in our residential buildings, much of which is generated with natural gas. So that's referred to as stationary energy to distinguish it from the energy used for transportation. And then there are the other four categories. Waste is a modest contributor, as you can see. Solid waste, in particular, industrial processes contribute a couple of percentage points of emissions. We don't have a lot of industry on the Cape, so it's not surprising that that is not very high. And then agriculture, which we also don't have very much of. And their soil management makes a difference. Now, all the way over to the right, you see land use, and specifically forests, although marshlands contribute. There you see a -9, and the -9 is actually a +9 in terms of positivity, because the forests are soaking up carbon. So they're actually reducing emissions on the Cape. Those emissions are subtracted from the overall total. And that's what we mean by net, the concept of net as opposed to gross, is a result of the fact that we do have significant forest cover and marshland on the Cape. And those land parcels are sopping up actually a significant amount of our carbon dioxide. So we need to keep the transportation in mind, the electricity, and particularly in terms of stationary energy and our land use.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you so much for sharing this. I know we'll come back to this with a few questions that are coming in. Yep. This was just done in the very recent
last year, so it's real progress.
That's great. So I know people will want to get into, in fact, one of the questions that's coming up is what's the realistic expectations in terms of changing the effects of climate change on Cape Cod, especially rising sea levels. So this gives us the ground, the baseline, doesn't it? Here's where we are. And now, how are we doing across the Commonwealth in reducing these emissions?
Yeah, let's speak to that. So what you've got here is a chart, and on the left-hand column, the left-hand side, you see the greenhouse gas emissions from 0 up to 110. Along the bottom, you see time. From 1990 to 2050. And you see a couple of brown diamonds. I wish my pointer could point to them, but I think you can find them. Small brown diamonds, one right at the end of the graph. And that's actually at 2020, the year 2020 last year, and one down to the right at 2050. You see those those are the goals of the Massachusetts Global Warming Solutions Act, which was passed in 2008. And so you see that the goal for 2020 was actually a 25% decrease from the 1990 baseline. And you see, looking at the jagged line, that we made very little progress until about 2005, and then really began to make some change. And this graph is only through 2017. But I can say, having been on the web and followed the conversation at the state level, that we are very close to that first brown diamond. So we're doing pretty well in terms of the state goals. You see the blue square. The blue square is the Paris Accord goal. Okay, so we're running a little bit ahead of the Paris Accord, but most of us feel that the Paris Accord is not nearly aggressive enough. So while we may be doing a little better than the Accord stipulated, we need to do still better than that. The 2050 triangle down there to the right is way down there. We've got a long, long way to go to get there. We've got 30 years to do it. So we need to be extremely aggressive in pushing ourselves to reach that goal. And a number of things are happening that I'll be covering, which are going to help a lot. That khaki bar there, that is actually, those are goals set by the New England governors of the New England states, and the premiers of Eastern Canada. So the Canadians on the East Coast and the New England governors are working together to set goals. And you see that those goals, which are at 2030, fall roughly on that line from the first diamond to the second diamond. So we're all pretty much in concert in terms of the goals and how quickly we'd like to reach them.
Yes, there's a lot to be talked about with this, and I think we'll come back to this with a Q&A. So I want to give you an opportunity to continue the presentation, but we will bring this slide back up with some of the questions that are coming through.
Yeah, I can come back to it.
Oh, good. That would be great. Because how are Cape Codders and visitors contributing to these emissions? We live in a place where there's a lot of, second family homes, and the Cape doubles, and the islands double in size in the summer.
Yeah, I wanted to just quickly bring us back then to the inventory. To try to move from the emissions to the remediations. So clearly, if we're going to make progress on the Cape, we've got to work hard on transportation, right? And that's going to mean electric cars, among other things. If we have enough time, I can tell the story of my electric Bolt, which I acquired used in December, and has been an interesting experience. In order to drive electric cars, we need an infrastructure, and that infrastructure has to include charging stations where we can charge up our vehicles. We can do that to a certain extent from our residences, but if we're going to travel any distance at all, we need public charging stations, and I'll come back to that. On the stationary energy side, that's all about electricity. And so one of the exciting things that's happening on the Cape involves the generation of vast amounts of electricity. And I'll come back to that. So with that in mind, we can go forward to a set of examples if you'd like, Susan.
Yeah, just before we do that, I just wonder if we go back to that previous slide just once, because somebody's asking about that there's a concern that methane is not accurately accounted for in the greenhouse gas emissions, and nor is biodiversity and things like that. So can you just clarify what this chart is showing and how it's not taking into account greenhouse or methane or tipping points? So that's one of the reasons that you say bold is so good.
I think it is taking into account methane. It's a greenhouse
Oh,
gas
do you?
emissions inventory. So I'm sure that the commission has factored in methane. But it's something
Okay.
you could follow up on and check in to the commission about. I haven't gotten into the weeds with the commission in terms of the actual calculations and what they cover.
Yeah, great. And then I don't see it here, but somebody is asking what MTCO2E means. I don't know if that's
I was afraid of that. I was afraid of that. It's some giant amount of carbon dioxide, I think. It is.
Oh, I see. It's over on the left-hand side.
On the left-hand side, and I don't know. I don't know. Let's pretend that M stands for mountains, but I don't know.
Okay, that's okay. You don't have to be the be-all, end-all. You're not a climate scientist.
I wish I knew everything, but I don't.
Oh, that's right. Well, so now I know you've got quite a number of examples to get into, and maybe why don't you just begin with why you're giving examples instead of showing, more numbers.
We don't have at the collaborative. We don't have the capacity to actually gather carbon emissions data, so we're not data driven in that sense. What we can do is we can document actions that are taking place on the Cape, and we do that each year. And so we can see how these actions are accumulating, how changes, positive changes are occurring. And so what I'll be doing is sharing the actions for 2020. I'm just going to be talking about what's happened over the past 12 to 15 months. And I'm going to do that under five headings, which you see on the screen. Planning and organizing, which is critical, particularly at this stage, at the beginning. The reduction of fossil fuels, the generation of clean electricity, the ways that we educate and engage and advocate, and we being the collective, not just the collaborative. And finally, I want to talk a little bit about efforts in the area of energy justice. So we've already referred to the inventory, and I can say that we're just delighted that the Cape Cod Commission has come on board with the enthusiasm and engagement that they're showing, and this is relatively recent. It is over the past 15 months. So they are now developing what they're calling the Cape Cod Climate Initiative. They're out talking to folks all over the Cape in focus groups and in stakeholder meetings that the collaborative is participating in, and many of our members are also engaged in. And so this is going to make a big difference. The Climate Initiative will come out with an action plan with very specific steps to be undertaken over the next 30 years. And we're just delighted that the Cape's major planning organization is willing to jump in and take this as seriously as they are. We've mentioned the Faith Communities Environmental Network. which is, I think, 35 organizations strong, churches, synagogues, and has grown significantly just in the past year, 13 new members. The network sponsored a major forum in Chatham just over a year ago, the Faith and Science Forum, that brought 300 people together to discuss climate change and the kinds of actions that individuals can take to reduce their carbon footprints. So we're thrilled to have the Faith Communities Environmental Network a part of the collaborative, and we rely on them strongly for advocacy and action initiatives. Shifting then to the reduction of fossil fuels. We've been working closely with the Regional Transit Authority on the Cape, which is gearing up for the electrification of buses. And so what you see in the picture, the big new solar array that they have built at the Transportation Center in Hyannis. You also see the picture of one of a number of charging stations that they have installed there. They have enough charging stations. I think they've got 20 new charging stations in place. And so the next step will be to bring electric buses on board. And in that regard, we have a wonderful example on Martha's Vineyard. The Transit Authority over there has taken huge strides. Of course, they don't have to drive so far because the island is modest in size, but they've been electrifying their fleet and fueling the fleet with renewable energy, and they also have a major storage capacity for electricity. Last year, they added 6 new electric buses to their fleet, and they'll be adding still more, 4 more this year. They've got a operations and maintenance facility that now is capable of supplying electricity for charging stations that can handle 40 buses, 7 vans, and 6 cars. So this is a major undertaking over on Martha's Vineyard, and a terrific example for the Cape. They're about to install solar canopies that the buses will slide under, where they can charge with solar power, and they also are beginning to introduce what they call inductive charging. These are bus charging stations out on the route where buses can recharge in order to be able to be in service for an entire day. So this is a terrific advance over on Martha's Vineyard. We had an electric vehicle show just over a year ago. You see pictures here. This is at the Hyannis Airport. Wonderful collaboration among Cape and Vineyard Electric Co-op, Eversource, Cape Cod 5, Cape Air, Chamber of Commerce, and the airport, and several others. This is something we'd like to see happening every year. It hasn't happened in the past 11 months because of the COVID crisis.
Yeah, let me just bring in one question about the electric vehicles, because everybody's, probably so many people on this call have a hybrid, and we're moving towards all electric.
Yeah.
Do you have any insight into how likely it is that we can succeed on the Cape with getting where we need to go with a one-car family if it's all electric? I know you just bought one, and I'm asking you to tell this, but yet we're running out of time too, so we'll have to move forward quickly.
I think that the charging stations are popping up all over the place. So getting the infrastructure in place is not going to be terribly difficult. We've got a lot of practice. There are private companies out there that are working with the towns. So I don't think charging is going to be a huge challenge. I can say, because I bought my car used, and it was 3 years old, that it was very reasonably priced. I paid just over $15,000, and I got a trade-in on my hybrid. So the price, you know, for those of us who need to replace a vehicle, I think the electric is a good choice. The challenge is range. How far can you go on a full charge? In the case of the Bolt, I can get up to Boston and back, but I don't have a lot of charge left over when I get home. So let me stop it with that.
Thanks.
Clean electricity.
Yeah.
Yeah, is the third category. And there, I'm sure all of you know that Vineyard Wind is coming online with a major offshore facility that's going to generate enough electricity to meet the entire need of Cape Cod and the islands. And that electricity is going to come ashore in Barnstable, and then it's going to escape over the canal unless we use it up. So the more we can electrify, the more we will capture before it disappears over the Cape Cod Canal. And so I'm a huge advocate of electrifying everything that we can possibly electrify. The price of electricity is going to be extremely reasonable because these turbines are very efficient and very competitive. There are some issues with certification. We think that with the Biden administration online and tremendously supportive of offshore wind, that Vineyard Wind will be certified, certainly in 2021. And they promise, and I've just reviewed their promises on the web, they promise to be online and generating electricity by 2023. So that's very exciting. And then Mayflower Wind is coming online behind Vineyard Wind, and behind Mayflower is Vineyard Wind 2. So you're going to see offshore wind up and down the East Coast. The Cape and Vineyard Electric Co-op I mentioned earlier, they've been in business. They're a nonprofit since 2007. And they've done 32 solar installations, and they generate over 33 million kilowatt hours of renewable energy each year with those solar arrays that you see on your landfills and elsewhere. And just over the past year, they've done a major solar project on Monomoy Regional High School, put a big battery storage project into Dennis Yarmouth, which is our emergency center on the Cape. They're doing a lot of the electric vehicle charging stations for the towns on the Cape and over on Martha's Vineyard, and they're also working hard on battery storage with a big project I know in Provincetown.
Yep. And Mana, I hate to do this, but we're right at time of where we should be going to Q&A. So if you could buzz through just a couple of these in 2 minutes, maybe just hit the highlights.
I can come back to them through the Q&A. So certainly there's transportation on the water that we could talk about. The community college has got courses now, relevant courses going. We had a terrific youth climate action summit just a year ago that was very exciting, involved 100 youth from about 8 or 9 different high schools across the Cape and Martha's Vineyard. And we're also reaching out to our summer visitors. Those of us who rent properties are doing a variety of things, solar and energy appliances and EV chargers to accommodate the summer folks. And then energy justice is very, very important to us. We look at all of the projects going on from a justice perspective, making sure that clean energy is affordable to everyone, that as much of it is locally owned as possible, ideally solar, that the jobs pay a living wage, that we're training the workers that are going to be needed offshore and elsewhere, and that we're making sure that all voices are heard. A particular example there is the Cape Light Compact's proposal to make a combination of heat pumps, solar panels, and battery storage available free to 200 families on the Cape.
Great.
So we're ready for
That
Q&A.
is so many. Great. In fact, the very last question that came in is related to the Cape Light Compact. Mon, do we have a community choice aggregation program in the Cape Cod area? Someone from off Cape is asking that.
Compact does. The way to learn more about that is to contact the Compact. I wish we had their email address here, but we don't. But we certainly can track that down.
Yeah, everyone can just look at that. We are very fortunate to have the Cape Light Compact be a type of aggregate for the entire group of 15 towns, and they have saved us a lot of money and also brought in 100% clean electricity. The default is that we all get 100% renewable energy through the compact if we don't do anything with our electricity bills. But that might be electricity from all over the country. There is a special program that you can pay a little bit more and get either 50% local renewable or 100% local renewable. They have not had a lot of luck with getting people to pay more for it, and that's why they've kept it where it's nationwide. So, another question, back to the slide that showed the 6 categories from the Cape Cod Commission. What kinds of land are already protected by law, and how can we average folks contribute to protection of carbon absorbing areas?
Well, the major land protection organizations are towns first, and then our conservation trusts. I know, for instance, in Orleans that a third of the land in the town is undeveloped. And that undeveloped land is made up of both town lands, much of it protecting our water sources, and conservation trust lands. So those are 2 major categories. Of course, there's a large tract of land in the Upper Cape owned by the federal government. That's the military base. And we could come back to that because there is a proposal there to cut 170 acres of prime forest land in order to create a machine gun range, of all things. So that's a good example of an arena in which community, citizen action is needed. And at least I believe, and I think, and the collaborative believes, in order to keep that 170 acres from being cut. So one thing that individual citizens can do is to become aware of those kinds of threats and respond to them. But we can also do things on our own property, of course. We can plant trees. We can plant shrubbery. All of those are steps that will help absorb carbon dioxide.
Yeah, that is great. We're going to turn it over to Lana in just a bit, in just a minute. But before we do that, if you would answer this question: is the Climate Collaborative, do we lobby in the legislature?
We do not support political candidates, because nonprofit organizations are not allowed to do that by law. We lobby nonpartisan for particular legislative initiatives, so that as a collaborative we can support, for instance, the laws that we're going to or the initiatives that we're going to hear about in just a minute at the state level. And we certainly write, for instance, to our governor and encouraging him to sign legislation related to clean energy. So yes, we lobby, but only in a very nonpartisan way. We don't take political positions.
Great. Well, good. So we will turn it. There's other questions that we were prepared to answer, but the league has other things they want to add to the agenda today. We had hoped to just focus on this, but there's so many more topics that could be brought up. I'm sure this is not the last climate conversation that the league will have, but I'd like to ask you to stop sharing your slide. Mon, thank you so much for bringing us this information, and more people will have access to the recording. And any last comments that you want to make before we turn it over to Lana about actions people can take, or did you cover that pretty well?
I would summarize simply by saying that electricity is the key, and offshore generation is critical. Wind is our resource down here on the Cape. And so we want to electrify as much as we possibly can. And at the individual family level, that includes solar arrays. It includes electric vehicles, and heat pumps are a wonderful way to heat and cool with electricity. So we have a variety of strategies that we can use locally to take advantage of all the electricity that's going to be passing through Cape Cod.
Terrific. Well, thank you so much. Lana's going to come off of mute and then share her screen, and we will move forward now. Thank you again, Mon.
Okay, thank you. Hi, and Mon, I want to thank you for that really wonderful presentation. One of the things I just love about doing a presentation or a webinar like this with other groups is expanding the network. I now include you guys as part of my network, and I hope we'll be able to work together. And just to clarify that the league is totally nonpartisan. We do not support candidates or parties. We support issues. So we're right in line on that piece, Mon. So thank you for mentioning that. And also thank you for, well, there's so much you talked about that is so critical, like mitigation versus adaptation. Very important distinction. Thank you for that. Okay, well, yes.
Excuse me, while you're getting your screen shares up, I just want to introduce you, if that's okay.
Oh, sorry.
That's all right. No, I know that you're ready to go, and that's wonderful.
I am.
But Lana has been a member of the League of Women Voters since 2008, joining shortly after retiring from a 35-year career as an elementary school educator and principal. Lana's work with the League spans local, state, and national levels. As a member of the League of Women Voters of Massachusetts Legislative Action Committee, she's been a member of that since 2009. Lana has focused on money in politics and climate change and energy. In 2017, Lana helped form and co-chaired the League of Women Voters of Massachusetts Committee for Environmental Action and Advocacy, and with another League colleague. The mission of the committee is to inform and engage members across the state on critical environmental issues and policies impacting Massachusetts, and to support and promote the transition to clean, renewable energy and environmental policy through legislation and local action. Lana also serves as an executive committee member of the newly formed League of Women Voters of the United States Climate Emergency Task Force. Take it away, Lana.
Okay, well, thank you for that introduction. Let me get my screen shared with you all. Is that working?
It looks good. If you could expand it, that'd be great.
Okay. This is a problem here. Okay, I'm going to go into presentation mode so we can see it from. How's that? Okay, great. All right, well, so good morning, Cape Cod Area League and friends, and thank you for inviting me to be part of this presentation. I was asked to give, hang on, let me get rid of this. I was asked to give an overview of the status of state climate and energy legislation. I'll be providing links to everything I reference for those folks who would like to dig in more. Whoops. That wasn't supposed to happen. Sorry, not ready for that. So when the recording is sent out, if that is okay with the Cape Cod League folks. All right, so moving right along, just please understand that the bills that I'm going to be talking about and the policies are incredibly dense packed, a lot of information. So this is going to be kind of a zip line through what we're doing and what we're advocating for. And an overview, but happy to take questions and respond at a later time because I know time is short today. So, the title of this presentation is A Path Forward, Climate Action, A Path Forward. And when we're trying to get somewhere, as Mon mentioned in his presentation, it's important to know where we're starting from. And with climate change, we need to be very clear about where we are. The charts in this slide reflect global emissions. The reality is that despite the reduction in emissions due to brief COVID lockdown, emissions are still rising, continuing to add to the atmospheric concentrations of greenhouse gases that will last for decades. The 2020 Production Gap Report, produced by leading research institutions and experts in collaboration with the UN Environment Program, reveals that for the world to maintain 1.5 degrees Celsius warming, we're currently at about 1.2 degrees Celsius. Fossil fuel production needs to reduce by 6% per year over the next decade to mitigate the worst impacts of climate change. Instead, at this point, countries are planning an average 2% increase in fossil fuel production. The scientific consensus is that we need to act at a speed, scale, and scope that matches the urgency of the situation. This is truly an all-hands-on-deck moment. While action at every level of government and society is important, coherent, coordinated state, national, and global policies are critical to success in getting emissions down to the level they need to be and dealing with a global crisis. We can present individual town by town data on our emissions, but we're all contributing to the global impact of emissions, and we're all going to be experiencing the impact of that one way or another. So that collaboration and that awareness of the reality of the situation has not really been happening, but there is growing public concern about the climate, and world leaders are starting to face reality. Addressing climate change is now on the agenda in a growing number of countries, including our own. And I'm just going to say, and this is not a partisan comment, what a difference a president makes. So every legislative session, legislators are confronted by over 6,000 bills. So how does the state league decide which bills to work on? Increasingly, my focus is on bills and executive policies that can bring about systems change as quickly and as broadly as possible at the state and regional level for advocacy through lobbying and public forums. This is just a little piece of the State League website on advocacy. It shows the bills that we covered last session. That session ended on January 5th this year, but just to give you an example, so this is again a little snippet of a snippet. This is only the climate change and energy bills that I cover. And what you'll see is the full range of issues covered by the league if you go to that webpage. What you see in red on this slide refers to support materials like testimony, letters to the legislature, etc., that give in-depth information about the information. So of the approximately 13 bills that were listed under my care for last session, 13 of them approximately went by the wayside, but 2 of the most significant bills on our list, referred to as the roadmap bill from the House and the next gen climate bill out of the Senate, made it through the legislative process and were sent to conference committee for reconciliation. Those bills were in the conference committee for 5 months of intense vetting and negotiation, and a new bill emerged that combined and kept intact some of the most critical provisions of those 2 separate bills. That bill was sent to Governor Baker on January 4th. The new legislative session began on January 6th. Because of the late date and the end of the extended legislative session, the governor had 2 options: to sign the bill into law or veto it. On January 14th, the governor vetoed the bill. Not to be deterred, the same bill, but renumbered as S9, because it's a new legislative session, it had to have a new number. That new bill was refiled by House and Senate leadership on January 19th with a statement that passing the bill again in the legislature would be handled with a sense of urgency and would move swiftly to get the bill back to the governor's desk as soon as possible. Now, I'm going to give you some news here. This is breaking news. I just got this information after this presentation had started, that apparently the House and Senate are set to vote again on this bill, the newly renumbered bill S9. Exact same bill. That means if they can vote and maintain the veto-proof majority that they had for the first round of voting on this bill, it will go to the governor's desk, and then they will control, with an override majority, they will control the fate of that bill. So that is good news, and it is breaking news. So there will be time for the governor to do amendments this time because we're at the start of a new session, and it will be up to the legislature. The word is that the legislature is willing to consider some minor changes, but nothing that would alter the major provisions of the bill. So now I need to do some lobbying. An action alert is going to be going out to all members of the league on Monday. And that action alert is going to ask every single member to please contact your state rep and state senator and urge that the legislature vote to pass the bill as is without going through an amendment process. It's already been vetted, and get it to the governor's desk as soon as possible. And even though we know that that vote at this point looks like it's going to happen on January this coming Thursday, whatever date that is, it is still important for your representatives and senators to know that you have their backs on this and that this is something you want. It's a critical piece of advocacy, so please, please take 5 minutes to do that. You'll have links on how to reach them in the alert that goes out. I will tell you there may be another alert depending on what happens with the governor. So just stay tuned to that, and would really appreciate your support with that. We have 48 local leagues in Massachusetts, and they are scattered across the state. And our representatives and legislature need to know that the league is active, our voice matters. So that's the end of the lobbying. And I don't know how much time I have left, actually. I don't think it's a lot. Suzanne, can you give me a time check?
I believe we're scheduled till 10:30. Is that right,
Oh.
Rich?
Well, 10:30 is come and gone.
I'm sorry, 11:30.
Okay.
You're right.
All right. That was a little scary. Okay, so now to talk about some of the bills that fit the criteria that I mentioned earlier, systems change, taking state and regional action, obviously more bang for the buck at a regional level. I'm going to give you some examples of that. So while we're waiting for the next shoe to drop in the Massachusetts legislature and executive branch, there has been some incredibly critical work being done by the executive branch at both the regional and the state level. You heard Mon talk about the very, very high emissions score that you all get in the Cape Cod area, 55.5%. Well, for the New England region, that emissions rate is in the 40 to 43% category. It is the largest sector, but I will also tell you that the built environment, what did you call it, on the stationary environment of buildings, etc., is right behind it. But transportation is a big nut to crack, and we've got a regional agreement to move on this. I'm going to ask if you could do this for me. If you have ever heard of the Transportation and Climate Initiative Plan, could you please raise your hand by using the reaction button? Okay, I can't see how many hands have been raised because my whole screen is covered by my presentation, but I would be very interested to know if somebody could give me a sense of the awareness of that particular initiative. It's a really huge deal. And I'm happy to report that our governor has been one of the leaders in moving forward with this Transportation and Climate Initiative. And I'll talk a little bit more about that. The Transportation and Climate Initiative actually involves 13 jurisdictions. And on December 21st, 2020, after years of work, this initiative was launched. And Massachusetts was one, of 4 jurisdictions to sign on to this and support it. 8 other states have actually signed an agreement to continue to work with the entire group towards a plan that can be used within their own jurisdictions. So that is good news. There are a variety of reasons why some states join in or don't at the start of a program like this. It is not a surprise that we didn't get 100% buy-in, but it's expected that other states will be joining along the way here, and that is all good news. So I will mention that the 4 jurisdictions, which are Massachusetts, Rhode Island, Connecticut, and DC, actually as a jurisdiction, actually represent the bulk, over 70% of the economy and the emissions load from the transportation sector. So it's not a large showing in terms of initial buy-in, but it's a very significant number of jurisdictions that have joined. So that is all excellent news. The League has been a strong supporter of the Regional Transportation and Climate Initiative, or TCI, for the past 2 years. It's an example of a policy that's at the scale and scope we need to be working on to reduce emissions. TCIP is down here. Oh, so what's happening now is that this initiative was launched and the 4 jurisdictions that signed on are going to be working on what is called a model understanding. And that is a model rule, which is an understanding that will basically guide what happens within the various states so that sign on to the climate initiative. And what that means is that it is not a fixed, you must do this, you must do that. There are certain minimums that are incorporated into the memorandum of understanding that are part of the model rule and will be fixed. And I'm very happy to say that one of the provisions has to do with considering environmental justice communities in the planning and the distribution of revenue that comes out of this initiative. So that is a difference, and it is a critical difference. And as I said, 35% is set as the amount of revenue from the initiative that will go to different jurisdictions. That is a minimum. So individual states and jurisdictions are able to increase that amount, but they cannot decrease it. So we've set a bar, which I think is really, really important. I'd also like to mention that virtually all the climate bills that have come out recently, and certainly the ones that the League supports, all have a significant environmental justice component to them. So that is really good news. Okay, I think I can.
Lorna, can I
So-
ask you to sum up?
Oh, okay. Well, let's see. This is going to be quick. So the other two really exciting pieces of information from the executive branch are the release, literally 9 days after Transportation and Climate Initiative Plan was released, of the executive branch 2050 decarbonization roadmap and the 2030 clean energy and climate plan. These three actions, combined with the climate bill that we are trying to move back to the governor's desk, really represent some of the most aggressive, ambitious climate initiatives of any state in the union, and are heralded as models of models for other states to follow. So that again is a good place to be. The last major legislation that came from our state legislature was 2008, and that was the Global Warming Solutions Act. So it's about time. I think we've waited long enough. So it's been a long and disappointing dry spell, but we've had to deal with climate change denial, setbacks, and reversals that have left us in a very precarious position. But the challenge of making the level of change necessary to lessen the worst impacts of climate change are huge. We need to stay the course with determination to succeed. So I want to thank you all for listening. I'm sorry this was such a fast run through, but that's what we had today.
Thank you so much, Lorna. Susan, do you have anything else that you need to add?
No, we are wrapping up.
You're good. Okay, great. Well, I just want to thank all of you, Mon, Susan, and Lana, for sharing your information with us. Clearly, it's apparent that we have a lot of work to do still ahead of us. And living on Cape Cod, we're all definitely aware of the changes that are taking place already due to climate change. So in that case, we all better get busy and start moving forward. Thank you so much, all of you who are out there in the audience attending. And just in case there's anyone that didn't have the opportunity to join us this morning, this presentation is being recorded, so that it will be available in the future for those people who would like to look at it. Take care, and thanks again for joining us.